A severed human ear, pickled in a jar of vinegar. It sounds like the prop from a grotesque horror film, yet this specific piece of decaying flesh was the catalyst that crashed the London Stock Exchange's predecessors and ignited a global naval war. It is one of history's most absurd paradoxes, a single anatomical part worth nothing, triggering a conflict that cost millions in gold and thousands of lives. But this isn't just a story about a British captain and a Spanish blade. It is the first true lesson in choke point economics. Most investors believe that markets are driven by numbers, earnings, and rational choices. They are wrong. History shows us that global trade is often held hostage by the irrational, by political theater, and sudden violent embargoes. While you worry about interest rates today, the real threat to your digital payment systems and global portfolio is identical to that pickled ear. It is a dormant signal of a supply chain fracture. By the end of this video, you will not only understand how trade wars start, but you will also master two critical non-traditional defense mechanisms: asymmetric hedging and logistical agnosticism.
This is Finance Beyond Seas. We explore the moments where the currents of maritime history and the tides of the global economy collide. We're here to navigate the wreckage of the past, to find the financial lessons that will protect you today. We analyze history and systems, not futures. Nothing presented here is financial advice. It is purely historical and economic commentary.
Let's set the coordinates for the Caribbean, 1731. The global superpower is Spain, holding a tight monopoly over trade in the Americas. Britain is the rising challenger, hungry for new markets. The tension is thick, not unlike the trade friction we see between major Eastern and Western powers today. Captain Robert Jenkins, a British merchant brig mariner, is stopped by the Spanish Coast Guard, La Isabela, near Havana. Accused of smuggling, a common practice to bypass heavy tariffs, Jenkins is bound to the mast. The Spanish captain, Julio Leon Fandino, draws his sword, slices off Jenkins' left ear, and sneers, "Go and tell your king that I will do the same to him if he dares to do the same." Here's where the chronology gets interesting. The war didn't start immediately. Jenkins picked up his ear, put it in a jar, and sailed home. It took 7 years for the political machine to weaponize this event. In 1738, Jenkins presented the jar to the House of Commons. The public was outraged. The financial markets, however, were terrified. Think about that 7-year gap. This delay in reaction is exactly what we see today when a geopolitical tension, like a blockage in the Panama Canal or a tariff threat, simmers before boiling over. It's a lagging indicator of violence. And this crisis was the birth of the asymmetric hedging strategy we will define later. But first, let's see how the money moved. When war was finally declared in 1739, the real weapon wasn't the cannon, it was the embargo. Spain canceled the Asiento contract, the permission to sell slaves and goods in Spanish America. Overnight, the South Sea Company, a favorite of British investors, saw its primary revenue stream vanish. Merchants who had bet everything on efficiency and the single most profitable route were ruined. Their ships rotted in ports. However, a different class of merchants survived. These were the traders who realized that the Asiento was a political privilege, not a business right. They didn't rely on the efficiency of the direct route. They relied on the inefficiency of the blockade. They shifted capital into privateering, state-sanctioned piracy, and contraband channels through Jamaica. They monetized the chaos. The lesson? When the official highway closes, the scenic route becomes the most profitable asset class. But it wasn't just a Caribbean phenomenon. This pattern of political amputation of trade routes echoes loudly into the 19th century with the Continental System of 1806. Napoleon Bonaparte, realizing he could not invade Britain militarily due to the Royal Navy's supremacy, decided to wage war on the ledger books. He issued the Berlin Decree forbidding any European nation under French control from trading with the British. The intention was to bankrupt the nation of shopkeepers by closing every port from Barcelona to Hamburg. On paper, it looked like the ultimate economic stranglehold.
However, markets are like water. They cannot be compressed, only diverted. Napoleon's attempt to force an entire continent into economic submission created a paradox that destroyed his own strategy. The blockade didn't stop British goods. It simply added a massive risk premium to them. Smuggling ceased to be a crime and became a necessity of state survival. The irony reached its peak when Napoleon's own army, marching into Russia, was found wearing boots manufactured in Northampton and coats woven in Leeds. His own quartermasters had to use smugglers to bypass his own blockade because the French supply chain had collapsed. The lesson here is brutal but clear. When a central authority tries to ban a market necessity through an embargo, they don't kill the trade. They merely transfer the profits from legitimate tax-paying merchants to the agile, gray market operators. The system doesn't stop, it just becomes more expensive and more ruthless. Let's pull the lens closer to our modern timeline. 1973. The weapon is no longer a sword or a decree, but a valve. The OPEC oil embargo was the Jenkins Ear of the industrial age. In retaliation for U.S. support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War, Arab oil producers cut supply and quadrupled prices. For the first time in modern history, the Western world realized that its immense industrial engine had a kill switch located thousands of miles away. The shock wasn't just about the price at the pump, it was existential. The global supply chain, addicted to cheap and infinite energy, went into cardiac arrest. Stock markets lost nearly half their value in a grueling bear market. But look closer at the mechanics. Just like in 1739 and 1806, the physical commodity didn't disappear from the earth. The oil was there. The tankers were there. The crisis was a logistical choke point created entirely by political will. This event shattered the illusion of the free market. It proved that a handful of political actors could override the supply and demand curve overnight. It taught a painful lesson that many forgot by the 1990s. Efficiency is a liability. When you optimize a system for perfect price and speed, you strip away its immune system. The moment the political valve closes, the efficient system dies, while the redundant, inefficient system survives. Fast forward to today, the jars of vinegar are gone, but the severed ears are everywhere. We are living in the golden age of geopolitical risk modeling. Look at the semiconductor industry. A blockade in the Taiwan Strait is the modern equivalent of the Spanish canceling the asiento. It doesn't just stop one company, it freezes the entire technological ecosystem of the West. Or consider the weaponization of the SWIFT payment system. When nations are cut off from the dollar, they don't stop trading, they build ghost fleets and alternative payment rails, just like the smugglers of Jamaica.
As you can see, whether it's 18th century privateers or 21st century shadow tankers, the mechanism is identical. Technology has changed, but the human desire to choke trade has not. And remember the lesson of the merchants who survived the Spanish War? That logistical agnosticism, the refusal to be married to one method of transport or payment, is the key lesson we promise to explore. Today, we see friendshoring and nearshoring touted as solutions, but these are just fancy words for running away from the risk. The real danger today isn't just a physical blockade, it's a digital embargo. What happens if the undersea cables, the trade routes of our data, are severed? The pattern is clear. Efficiency is fragile. Redundancy is survival. What does this mean for you? You might say, I'm not a shipping magnate. I don't care about trade routes. But you're wrong. Your pension fund, your savings account, and the availability of the smartphone you are watching this on are all leveraged bets on the idea that the world will remain peaceful and borders will remain open. If you are investing purely based on PE ratios or past performance, you are acting like the South Sea Company directors in 1738, ignoring the captain with the missing ear. The systemic risk today is that we have optimized our supply chains to be just in time. A single geopolitical shock, a single ear severed in the South China Sea or the Strait of Hormuz turns just in time into running out of time. The cost of being unprepared isn't just a temporary dip in your portfolio. It is the inability to access your wealth when the digital gates close. These scenarios are not predictions. They are historical parallels used to illustrate system behavior under stress.
So, how do you protect yourself in an era of weaponized trade? Let's revisit the promises we made. First, we have asymmetric hedging. In 1739, the smart money didn't just hoard gold. They invested in the disruption itself. In a modern context, this doesn't mean buying guns. It means allocating a portion of your resources to assets that benefit from volatility and inefficiency. When supply chains break, Who fixes them? Companies that specialize in logistics, cybersecurity, and local manufacturing tend to outperform global giants that rely on frictionless borders. You're looking for the fixers, not the growers. Second, we have logistical agnosticism. This is the strategy of counterflow. Do not rely on a single currency or a single jurisdiction for your financial security. Just as the British merchants used Jamaican smugglers to bypass the blockade, you must ensure your financial life has multiple ports of entry. This isn't about hiding money, it's about accessibility. If one banking system freezes due to a geopolitical embargo, do you have a secondary, unrelated system to buy bread? The goal is not to predict the war. The goal is to build a ship that doesn't sink when the trade route changes. We are often taught that history is a straight line of progress, a steady march towards stability and reason. It is not. It is a spiral. The names of the empires change, Spain, France, OPEC, but the choke points remain the same. We build castles of sand called globalization, and then act surprised when the tide of geopolitics washes them away. The mistake is not in building the castle, the mistake is in believing the tide will never come back. There is a profound truth in the maritime world. The captain who prays for calm seas has already lost. The captain who reinforces his hull for the storm survives. Do not base your financial future on the hope that politicians will be rational or that trade routes will remain open. That is a gambler's fallacy. Instead, embrace the chaos. Accept that the embargo is coming. Do not fear the severed ear. Do not fear the disruption. Fear only your own rigidity in a fluid world. Be the water, not the wall. If this journey gave you a new perspective on the hidden risks in your world, cast your anchor here. Subscribe to Finance Beyond Seas. I have a question for the comments. Looking at today's news, what pickled ear do you think we are ignoring right now? Let's discuss the warning signs below. Until the next tide.